You're right there, fellow mini painters and lovers of all things old hammer related, and welcome to another video from Nostalgiahammer Hobbies. In this video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit special, and it's an awful lot of fun. And, well, you've seen the thumbnail. I hope you enjoy. The bulk of this video is going to be focused on doing the lightning arcs between the energy globes on the actual shock attack gun itself, and the painting of the Ork and the shock attack gun. However, this is probably one of the most orkiest of orky weapons out there, and the sculpt I think actually quite reflects this very nicely. And the rules are mental, so we are going to have a quick look at those before we get to painting, just because they're an awful lot of fun, so why not? The picture of the shock attack gun in the 2nd edition 40k Ork Codex is really detailed and gives you plenty of detail for you to go off by when it comes to painting it. You've got a lovely side view where the hourglass is, a bit of a back view and the front view. It gives you plenty of information to go by. It's a lovely picture. The rules for the shock attack gun especially are very orky. For a start, it doesn't actually fire ammunition or rounds like a traditional gun does. What it does is create a sort of a tunnel between the warp, between the mech boy that's holding the weapon and its intended target. Its range is limited, but it just has to be within line of sight and within the standard firing rules in 2nd Ed 40k. So within a 90-degree arc and, like I said, within line of sight. What it is, the basic premise is that what they do is they shove a load of snotlings actually into the tunnel that goes through the warp. And just travelling through the warp drives the snotlings completely insane and mad with fear. Which, understandably, it would do. Now, to actually hit, you don't do any of the standard rolls that you normally do. You have a blast template that you place down, and you roll the scatter dice for it. If you roll a hit on the target, the template stays exactly where you've done it. If you roll an arrow, what you do is you follow the other dice, which has got a misfire or numbers on it ranging from 2 to 10, going up by 2s. And this shows basically the distance and the direction in which that it goes off direction. If you roll a misfire, you roll on the misfire chart afterwards. But if you roll a hit, like I said, you don't actually follow the standard armor penetration rules. What you do is you follow the charts that are on the other page. Now these charts are split up into 6 different groups. You've got the shock attack gun misfire table, then you've got what happens to dreadnoughts, robots, wraithguard and terminators if the shock attack gun hits it, what happens to foot troops if the shock attack gun hits it, what happens to vehicles, support weapons or bunkers. Now, for troops, it's not actually massively effective against troops. I mean, you have a blast marker, on a roll of a 1, they pretty much does nothing. On a roll of 2 to 5, the snotlings materialise in amongst all the troops, completely insane and attack everyone. You basically get a normal saving throw with no armor modifications or anything, and you take 1 wound if you fail. On a roll of a 6, however, basically the snotlings materialise inside the troop, which is a very nasty way to go. When you look at the ones for dreadnoughts, robots, terminators and wraithguard and that lot, you got the roll of a 1, it basically just jams up a leg or something. On a 2, you destroy a randomly selected weapon. On a 3 to 5, this is actually, I think, probably quite a nasty way to go. In fact, probably the nastiest one if you ask me, and it's the most common one. And this is that the snotlings actually materialise directly inside the body of whoever is in the suit. So dreadnought or terminator or something, those snotlings materialise directly inside, say, like your chest cavity or something. That is very nasty. On a 6, similar sort of thing, but not quite as disgusting. They basically they materialise inside the suit with you. And where there's not a lot of space, like say inside a Terminator suit or something like that, those snotlings are not going to have a lot of room and you're not going to stand a lot of chance. So you're dead. If it's going against vehicles, on a 1, the steering mechanism is just jammed up with snotlings and it remains stationary for the rest of the game. On a 2, it gets stuffed inside basically the weapons feeds of the ammo of the weapons. And on a roll of a 1, 2 or 3, the whole weapon explodes. Because the weapon that's blowing up is actually inside the vehicle because of the snotlings, you don't even roll armor pen or anything else like that. So if it does blow up on a roll of 1, 2 or 3, you basically just go straight onto the weapons damage table of that vehicle. On a 3 to 4, basically the same as the one for the troops for most of it. They just materialise inside there, start attacking everyone. So you get a basic armor save, and if you fail it, you take a wound. On a roll of a 5, this is quite funny actually, to be honest. The snotlings basically materialise inside the engine, and on subsequent turns, on a d6 roll of a 6, the vehicle's going to blow up, which, that's very orky, and I love that one. And on a roll of a 6, the snotlings appear absolutely insane, wrap themselves around the driver's head, so he can't see what he's doing. The vehicle goes out of control and slams into stuff. And that's the vehicle done for the entire game from that point. Against support weapons, it's actually quite interesting as well. On a 1 to 3, on subsequent turns, the weapons platform actually has to roll a d6. And on a 1, 2, or 3 roll, that weapons platform just blows up, killing the crew. And on a 4 to 6, that basically happens straight away. The snotlings appear all mad and insane right inside the weapons ammo feed, and they explode straight away, destroying everything. And against bunkers as well, on a roll of a 1, you just got one model is killed with no arms save allowed. So if you put Terminators, I don't know why you put Terminators inside a bunker, but if you had, that's one Terminator just outright killed, that's pretty harsh actually. On a 2 to 5, it's a similar one. It's the same as it is for a few of the other ones, where they basically, all the snotlings appear inside the bunker, absolutely insane, and try and attack it to everybody. And you've got to make your basic saving throw, and if you fail, a -1. But on a roll of a 6, now this could be really huge, the snotlings appears directly inside the ammo feed of the bunker, and it blows up straight away. All models are killed and the bunker is destroyed with no armor save allowed, which is pretty hefty. Now we've had a quick look at his rules and just how insane they are, what we're going to do is take him to the painting desk. I'm going to show you how I've done that lightning arc effect between the energy orbs of the shock attack gun, and then we are going to give it a real nice paint job straight out the codex. So grab yourself your cuppa and let's get to the desk. After the mech boy's been all stripped down and cleaned up ready for painting and converting, I've glued his plastic arm on. The next thing I'm going to do is actually select one of the old 40mm square fantasy bases. These are ones they also used to put things like the Carnifex and the Avatar on. And I'm going to put the model on this, and I'm going to glue the mech boy more towards the back of the base. I'm also going to pin the actual main body of the shock attack gun to him. Now I've drilled through for pinning on the handle here, as well as on his shoulder pad, as well as corresponding places there and there. I've also got ready to pin the front part on there, but I'm not going to do that just yet. So I've pre-drilled the holes, and I'm just going to use a bit of paper clip to pin the shock attack gun into place and glue the actual mech boy onto the base. There we go. It's all pinned and glued together, except for the front part. I've got something interesting to do with that. I've also pinned him to the base, just in case he were to fall off this, because there's going to be a fair bit of weight. And with what we're doing, last thing I want is for this guy to actually fall off his base or anything. So he's been pinned to the base, as well as glued on. I pinned this plastic arm on as well, because it kept doing what all plastic arms do on metal bodies, pinging off. And as you saw, he's had a pin go through there on his handle, and just on there on his shoulder, so he all fixed together quite nicely. And now we are ready to do something a bit special with this bit, and that is going to be a lightning effect using some brass wire and some very thin lead wiring. Going to be fun. Now the way I've done this to begin with is I've actually drilled some little pilot holes where I want them to start from. Now I recommend doing this before you actually put the other lightning arcs in, just in case when you're trying to hold it you slip and you end up squashing it. This is quite thin wire and you can easily squash out of shape. So drill the pilot holes first, and what I've used is, for the bigger bits, for this brass bit, I've used 0.5mm thick brass wire. And what I'm doing is I'm taking a pair of tweezers. I'm using the ones which are closed normally. You can do it if you've got quite a fine pointed pair of needle nose pliers or something, and sort of pinch it at one point and then bend it over the point. And you can bend it over to quite sharp angles, and you just want to go around it. And what I do is I do one, I go to the corner where it is and then bend over again. And what you want to do is sort of do this in a random directions. Where it's brass wire as well, this will bend quite easily. You sort of want it to go in that arc shape. But the good thing is as well, where this wire is so thin, you can sort of bend it into this zigzaggy shape and then manipulate it as you need to get it into the holes. And the whole time keep in mind what sort of shape you want to make of it as well. And you can also marry it up to where you have the holes so you can see if you're going in the right direction. There you go. That's with it all twisted round and kinked in. Just slot it into those holes. Now, what I better find the best way to do this is going to need some super glue and some super glue activator. Put the super glue on something off to the side. I just use the lid of my pot of paper clips. And you dip the ends of the wire in, get them in them holes, line it up where you're happy with it, and then dab the super glue activator on where it's glued in. There you go. To finish off this effect, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 0.23mm wire. This is lead-free stuff, but I think it's used for fishing wire mostly. Take a much shorter length of it and do exactly the same that I've just done. Like twist it round and bend it up a little bit. Well, quite a bit, obviously. Now this stuff is very, very delicate, so you can actually do this a lot easier with these tweezers. In fact, I would almost recommend using another pair that don't clamp shut like that. And make just a short little piece that's a bit jaggedy. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit longer than what you wanted in the first place, because you can easily cut this stuff off. It's so delicate. And now with this, what I'm going to do is basically the same as what I've just done with this going across. But I'm going to use these to go between the energy balls and this brass wire that we've used. So the same sort of thing, dab the end of your wire into your super glue, get your super glue activator ready, because this is really fiddly, and sort of put it where you want and rest it in place. And then if you touch it with the super glue activator, there you go. And do the same on the other side. Glue this on the front of the shock attack gun and come back when that has been attached. And here he is with the front of the shock attack gun attached. I think that looks pretty good. And where you can see little bits where of super glue, where the thinner wire is attached, that's going to be fine. So when we paint that up, that's just going to look like it's sort of forking out from each other, hopefully. And that's also why I'll put them on the bigger base. So that way, hopefully, it'll mean it's not as easy to bash these wires. And I don't honestly think it's going to make too much difference in the game. You normally don't have lots of stuff around this, I mean, for blast marks and things like that. And if you do, then I don't know. I mean, it's still a period appropriate. Yeah, it's not like it's much bigger than the model or anything. So hopefully this is all right. And here he is, all primed up and ready for some paint to be applied. First area I'm going to start with painting on this one is going to be his trousers. And for that, I'm going to begin with a coat of Balor Brown. And as with all the other colours, thin these down a bit and do it over a good 2 or 3 thin coats. And again, I'm going to be using my go-to brush at the moment, which is going to be a size 2 Green Stuff World Silver Series. Quite like these brushes, and they have a very nice point on them. And I'm finding that whilst this brush is still in good nick and the tips aren't knackered on it, I can use this brush for pretty much anything out there, including epic models. I'm then going to move on and do probably what I think is the most common colour for this one, and that's going to be all the black areas. And that's going to be a lot of areas on the gun, as well as all of his belts, straps, and any machinery that I'm going to be doing metallic as well. If you can get access to the photo in the second edition Ork Codex, it's got some brilliant pictures in there of this thing from quite a few angles, so you can actually see what needs to be what colour. And again, it's just a case of going around with the paint thinned down and doing all of this. Now there's quite a few areas that are this white and black tooth pattern. Those areas I'm also going to prime up black and do the white triangles over the top of it. Next up, I'm going to move on to doing all of the red areas. And for that, I'm going to use Vallejo Game Colours Bloody Red. And there's a lot of stuff on this that's this colour, so it's just a case of going around, thinning your paint down again. And I'm just going to go around this model, find out all the bits that I want done red, and we should be back when that is done. With the red and the black done, that is the 2 main colours base coated on this. But now I'm going to start doing all the details on the actual shock attack gun itself. And there's going to be quite a few little bits of detail on this. It's a very detail heavy model, brilliant looking. I'm going to start with these pipes, and they're sort of a green colour. And for that, I'm going to be using Warg Flesh as a base coat. And same again, thin this paint down and go over with a couple of nice thin coats to get a good smooth coverage over it. And if you do get some of this on the red or the black that you've already done, you don't have to worry about it. You can just go in and correct it and reapply the black or the red over it. The next colour I'm going to move on to base coating is Vallejo Game Colours Hammered Copper, and that's going to be going over a few of the cogs that are around the shock attack gun, as well as there's a hammer on his waist and a couple other little bits. After the copper, I'm then going to move on to doing the energy balls as well as the little dome on the back of the shock attack gun. And the first colour I'm going to use is Vallejo Game Colours Night Blue. It's a very, very dark, rich blue. So just thin it down and again go over a couple of thin coats to build it up nicely. I'm also going to paint this over the very base of the lightning arcs that I've done as well. I'm not sure yet just how far up I'm going to continue that, because this is going to be the darkest colour of these balls. Once the night blue has dried, I'm then going to take quite a stubby brush. For this I'm actually using a small Artist Opus dry brush. I'm going to take some Vallejo Model Colours Royal Blue, and I'm just going to, as carefully as I can, stipple this on these energy balls, as well as on this lantern at the back. And just carefully try and get in there. If you have to use a smaller brush, do it. And I'm just going to tap the brush on these areas whilst being as careful as I can with especially these smaller wires. This thinner stuff will bend and snap very easily. And don't worry if you get any of it on the red, because you can just go in and tidy up at this stage. Don't worry if you go in a bit heavy as well, because we are going to apply a couple of washes to this to tone it down a bit. What I'm then going to move on to is Vallejo Game Colours Electric Blue. And I'm going to paint that over the actual lightning arcs themselves, as well as thinning it down quite a lot and applying it as a glaze on the actual power orbs going up towards the base of the arcs. That includes the smaller ones. And then to finish off the base colours for these orbs on here, I'm going to take some electric blue again, very heavily thinned down, and paint jagged sort of lightning lines going out from where the lightning arcs have been added. And to do that, I'm just going to do little short lines. To finish off the lightning arcs and these energy orbs, I'm going to go to Vallejo Game Colours Glacier Blue. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to paint it right onto the point where the lightning arcs actually connect onto the orbs. And then I'm going to also try and sort of trace it in between the electric blue jaggedy lines that I've done as well for a little bit. I'm also going to use some of this Glacier Blue on the points of the lightning arcs that go through. So just on the bits which are most bent parts, basically. Now to follow on, I'm going to move on to doing pouches as well as the handle for the hammer on his waist. And for those, I'm going to give him a base coating of Gorthor Brown. Remember, thin this down a bit and do this over a few coats. From that, I'm then going to do this little hourglass that it's got on the side of the shock attack gun, as well as there's a headlight that it's got on it as well. And I'm going to use Uriel Yellow for these parts. Around the back here, he's got this little pull cord looking thing, as well as around the front, he's also got a little pipe. What I'm going to do is paint these in Talon Sand. The next colour I'm going to move on to is Ushakti Bone, which is going to be for this cloth here, as well as the skull that's on his groin plate. It's now that I'm going to move on to base coating the Orks skin, and for that I'm going to use a base coat of Vallejo Game Colours Sick Green. There's only a couple of base colours left to do now. The next one I'm going to do is all of the white areas. So that's going to be the engine housing and the shoulder pad and a few other bits and bobs dotted around the place. And this is going to take thinning it down and doing over several coats, because white can be a bit of a pain in the butt to get a nice smooth finish with. So just thin it down, be patient and keep going until you're happy. The next thing I'm going to do with the actual white is, if you look all over the model on the picture, you'll see there's loads of triangle patterns and some crosshatch and some checker patterns on there. So I'm going to do that next. Now I've actually changed my brush to a size 1 instead of the size 2, but this is actually, it's not particularly difficult to do, it's just time consuming. I'm just going to show you here where I'm going to go around painting in these triangles, picking them out. And the good thing with Orks is they don't have to be perfectly uniform. So if they're a little bit irregular, it doesn't matter so much. When it comes to doing the triangles, try and leave a little gap between each one and just roughly paint it in. Don't worry about getting it like perfectly opaque to begin with, because we're going to go back in and refine these in a minute. It's just a case of being patient and going around picking them out. And when you're doing the cross hatching, a nice way of doing it is to do a line just straight down the middle of it and then roughly sketch them in. Like I said, it isn't that this is difficult particularly, it's just that it's very time consuming to go through and do this. But it's just a case of being patient and filling them in. And like I said, where we're going to go in and refine these, they don't have to be perfect. And if you make a little bit of a mistake, it's all right. And there we go. That is all of the triangles and the checker work done. Like I said, it wasn't really difficult to do, but it was quite time consuming to get it done nice and neatly like this and gone round. But again, remember, because it's Orks, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. You can have some differences between the triangles. And now we are up to the final base coat, which is going to be Vallejo Game Colors Chainmail. And that is going to be going over any of the metallic areas to finish off, such as the cage for the orb up here. You have the front of the actual shock attack gun, as well as the arms that are holding the energy orbs in place, as well as a whole load of other little details dotted all about the place. If you want a reference, you can always look at the picture in the second edition Ork Codex, because that's got some very good amount of detail in there. But if you haven't got access to that, I will put that picture up on the screen now. And there we go. That is now all of the base colours finished on this boy. And I've got to say that the detail on this Ork is really good. Such a beautiful model. We're now going to move on to putting some washes on this. And to begin with, I'm going to do the trousers, the cloth, skulls and the pipe. And for that, I'm going to use Reichland Flesh Shade. Well, this is a different tone than what you would normally see, such as like the Orks Earth Shade or something. I'm hoping that this is going to add a slightly warmer tone to it. I'm then going to move on to Agrax Earth Shade, which I'm going to do over the brown leather pouches, the hammer handle, as well as any of the copper fittings that I've done. I'm then going to go over all of the silver metallic areas with Nuln Oil, and when it comes to doing the rivets, especially over any of the white areas, I'm just going to be very careful when I do this and try and just dot it onto the rivet itself and guide it down into the recess rather than risk getting any of the Nuln Oil all over the white that I've done. Over the hourglass and over the lights or anything else like that I've done yellow, I'm going to go in with Fugan Orange. And to help enhance the shading on the hourglass, I'm going to go back in once the first coat has dried with a second coat, but aiming it towards the lower half of the hourglass down at the bottom and the upper half of it on the top part. On the white bits of the shock attack gun, there are a couple of little lines sculpted into it. And the way I'm going to make those stand out is I'm going to use contrast paints Basilicanum Grey and paint it as carefully as I can directly into this recess. For the Ork's skin, as well as the green details that I've done on the shock attack gun, I'm going to use a Thonian Camo shade. Once the first coat of Athonian Camo shade has dried, I'm then going to go back in with it on areas of the Ork's skin that I want to be darker. I'll show you on this hand here. So it's areas like in between his fingers, going with a second coat of it, as well as like in here on his hand, basically anywhere that you would like to be darker and more defined. So on the face, it would be areas such as the gap in his cheeks and in his ears and anywhere like that. And that just helps to add a little bit more definition to it. Over the red, I'm going to use contrast paints Blood Angels Red. We're now on to the final wash, and that is going to be a very, very heavily thinned down mix of contrast paints Talisar Blue to 7 parts contrast medium. And I'm going to put this over the energy orbs and the arc lightning, just to add a sort of a richer, bluer tint to it all. This is going to be used more as a glaze than a wash, so you don't want to like slop it on there. With all the washes done, we are now ready to be moving on to highlights, and I'm going to begin with his trousers. And the first step is reapplying Balor Brown. whilst leaving the recesses that nice richer colour left over from the Reichland flesh shade. So thin this down quite a bit and just start carefully layering it back in. And then to finish off the trousers, I'm going to take some Zamesi Desert and pick out the more defined folds. And don't worry if you think it looks a bit starter to begin with, because when these paints dry, they do tone themselves down a bit. For the cloth on his waist, as well as the skull on his crutch plate part, I'm actually just going to go back to a Shakti bone and layer that back in. And for the leather pouches, I'm going to reapply Gorthor Brown to begin with. And then to finish off the leather pouches and the hammer handle, what I do is I take some Baneblade Brown and just pick out the edges of the pouches, and I try and do some random lines on the hammer handle, kind of help the wood grain stand out. For the pipe, I'm going to go back in with Talon Sand and use this as the sort of the highlight. And for the green cabling that I've done on the shock attack gun, I'm going to pick the detailing out with Lauren Forest. And then to finish off the green cabling, I'm going to take some Strachan Green and use this as a point highlight. The next bit I'm going to highlight is going to be the hourglass on the side of the shock attack gun. To begin with, I'm going to go back to Uriel Yellow and I'm going to thin this down a bit more than normal, and I'm going to glaze this from about the halfway point down to the centre. And this is going to take a couple of coats to do this. And then to finish off the hourglass, what I'm going to do is take some Flash Gits Yellow and do a little line of it at the very bottom of each part of the hourglass that's closest to the centre. There you go. I've also done the Flash Gits Yellow in the centre of the little headlight that's on the shock attack gun as well. I'm now going to move on to the copper areas, and for that I'm going to just reapply hammered copper over the majority of the areas. And then to finish off the highlight on the copper areas, I am going to move to Vallejo Game Colours Bright Bronze. I'm just going to use this on a few select areas. So you've got some rivets and sharper parts on this tap mechanism that's on the back, as well as parts on the hammer and a couple of the handles that are on the actual shock attack gun itself. Next up is going to be the areas that we did chainmail. To begin with, we go back in with chainmail and just reapply it on some of the larger areas, bring that shine back up. And then to finish off the metallic areas, I'm going to go to Vallejo Game Colours Silver and use this mostly on the rivets, or on any other edges that you fancy looking a little bit brighter. The next colour I'm going to move on to highlighting is going to be the black. For that, I'm going to use Vallejo Model Colours Neutral Grey. And I will even be highlighting all the little black triangles and squares. That, you just do a sort of an L highlight. You just do a thin little line down one side of it and then take it across the bottom a bit. And it's just a case of going around the entire model and picking these out. And then to finish off the boots specifically, I'm going to get some pure white and pick out the laces. Now then, we're almost getting there now. The next colour I'm going to highlight is going to be the reds. And to begin with, I'm going to go in with Bloody Red and reapply this, leaving the darker recesses. And yes, that does also include me picking out each of these diamond padded bits on his jerkin. Now, if you look at the picture in the codex, you'll see that his white shoulder pad and the tank of the shock attack gun have got these sort of squiggly flame things going on here. So I'm going to use the Bloody Red for that again and paint these in. And these look fairly simple, to be honest. Get the positioning right, and just squiggle them down like you would a sort of a snake. If you thin your paint down a fair bit when you do this, make it easier for the paint just to run off the brush. And you don't have to worry about being perfect with it to begin with either. We can go in and sort them out when we're done. Now that the flames have been done, we're going to move on to the final stage of highlighting the red. And that is going to be to take some Vallejo Model Colours Clear Orange and pick out the edges of any red bits. And that includes all of these padded sections on his jacket. And for the padded sections, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick out the edges of the top half of them like that. And there we go, that is all the red highlighted. We're very nearly there. There's just a couple of bits left to do. The next part we are going to highlight is going to be the Orks flesh. To begin with, I'm going to go back in and reapply sick green whilst leaving the recesses a bit darker. After that, I then move on to Vallejo Game Colours Goblin Green. And on areas like the top lip here, I'm just going to paint this into like sort of lines to imply texture. And then on the rest of it, like the lips, nose and cheeks and stuff, and fingers and knuckles, I'm going to use this to pick out the more defined areas. To finish off the Ork's face specifically, I'm going to do a mix of Vallejo's Goblin Green and Vallejo Game Colours Bile Green. I don't know, probably about 2 parts Goblin Green to 1 part Bile Green. Bile Green is a very, very, very almost yellow green. And with this mix, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out some of the more prominent areas in the Ork's face. So like his cheekbones, the bridge of his nose, his eyebrow, and across the top of his ear, things like that. Just to add a little bit of extra brightness to it. You can go with this as far as you like. Now that the Ork's flesh has been highlighted, it's time to move on to the last thing to highlight. And that is the energy orbs and lightning arcs. The first step I'm going to do when highlighting these is going to be going back to electric blue, thinning it down a fair little bit, and as careful as I can, tracing back over the lightning that I did beforehand, but trying to leave it a bit darker around the edges. So basically you're trying to get the electric blue sort of inside what you've done already. When it comes to the lightning arcs themselves, all I'm going to do is take this electric blue and paint it over like the very upper surf edges of it. When you're looking down on it, it's got some brighter bits, but then it's a bit darker on the underside. And you don't have to be exactly precise with this. If you go a little bit away from it, as long as it's thinned down, it adds that sort of chaotic element that natural lightning has anyway. I'm also going to take this electric blue and highlight the edges of the energy orbs. And then I'm going to go back to Glacier Blue, bring back the sort of lightning bolts coming from the point of contact with the actual lightning arcs and the energy orbs themselves. And then to finish them off, I'm going to take some pure white and paint it onto where the smaller bits of wire connect onto thicker bits of wire, just on that connection point, as well as on the base of the lightning arcs where they connect onto the actual orbs themselves. Just a little bit of it, just so it makes that final spot there just brighter. And then all he needs to be done after that to finish him off is his base doing. And we shall be back when that has been done. And here is the completed shock attack gun in all its Orky glory. All ready to go, fully painted. I've really enjoyed painting this shock attack gun. The way the gun's actually designed and sculpted is really quite interesting, and I love the way the whole orkiness of it all seems to go together really well. The whole hourglass and everything else on the back of it with all the cogs and the chains and springs and whatnot just looks so mismatched and orky. It's great, and it's something that seems to be lacking a little bit with today's Orks, where they look too deliberate. This looks very much like it was just put together by some Ork mechaniac completely losing his mind and just hammering parts together until it worked. I really do enjoy the classic 2nd edition bright colour schemes. The vibrant colours are in stark contrast to what you seem to see quite a lot these days with the whole grim dark aesthetic. And I don't know, there's just something about the bright colours that really do hit the spot for me. And if you fancy giving it a go with the wire to make lightning arcs, then this can work on many things. I've seen it done on power swords and all sorts of energy fields and stuff. And with the thicker 0.5mm wire, it wasn't actually too difficult to work with. It's quite sturdy. The 0.23mm stuff is a bit of a nightmare to work with. It's quite fiddly, and you do have to be quite careful with it because it can snap very easily. But that little touch adds quite a nice little finish to the lightning arcs, I think. The red flames on the white shoulder pad and fuel tank, or whatever it is, on the shock attack gun really stand out, and they look great. And I love that hourglass that's on the side of it. And again, I keep coming back to it. It's the little details on the shock attack gun that really did hit the spot for me when I was painting them, like the little pull cord on the back of it with the tap, You've got that, like I said, that weird little hourglass and all the little springs. You've got the little dials dotted around it and the lights. It's just such a mismatched looking machine that it's just so orky, and it's just great fun to paint. And the parts that are there really stand out to you as you're actually painting it, and it comes to life. And this has been an absolute pleasure to paint. Now, if you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out, why not give us a subscribe and hit that bell icon so that YouTube actually notifies you of when I put further content up, because there's more Ork stuff to come in the future. There's some very interesting models that I'm really looking forward to painting. Also, down in the description below, there's a link to a couple of things like a Ko-fi account, as well as my website if you fancy looking at some galleries and possibly getting a quote for a commission. And with all that stuff aside, I do hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you stick around for the next one. Stay smiling and keep the old hammer alive.